to also get greater alignment with the CCOs, who seem to have their own each and every kind of accommodation strategy and plan that flies in other direction?
We haven't looked at that wider issue of council's actual requirements and whether there's synergies from greater combination of council and CCOs. Our analysis is just purely financial and making the observation that there doesn't seem to be anything unique about the council's requirements for office space, and there's a freely available market for it, and therefore we question the need to own it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor John Watson.
Thank you. Just on the question to do with the local boards getting a piece of the action, I thought we already have a form of that in terms of that service optimisation resolution that we passed last year. So I think there is a form of that already in existence, so it would be interesting to know if any local boards have taken that up. Just in terms of your analysis of this sort of sale of assets, particularly as it goes to replacing something with a higher value, which in most cases would be housing. Did that really take account of the fact that in established urban areas, essentially the call's been made that there will be no more provision of open space as such, that will be confined to greenfield areas, so places like golf courses and whatnot, like the ones on the shore, that's it, there is no more to be provided. Did you take account of, in effect, the inability to replace like with like? Now that was what was said.
Yeah, no, look, saying, look, we're not advocating necessarily that you sell any parks, and certainly we haven't done any analysis to say this one could go or that one could go. All we're saying is you need to have the information to hand about the alternative, about the value that you've got tied up in any individual park or any individual piece of a park, so you can make informed decisions about the relative merits of retaining it as a park or using it in some other means. Yeah. So we haven't done a park by park analysis.
No, I understand that, but I guess in light of some of the other constraints that exist that have been well and truly signalled, numbers of options like that, when you look at it closely, are really practicable. If there's not to be a significant decrease in the service to the public that you have already signalled as an important part of any balancing that you might do.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that's true, and that's for the council to decide. But we're not talking about selling 100% necessarily either. I mean, we are talking that if the council is trying to find $2 billion, it might be able to get that by selling as little as 5 to 10%, right? And so, and it's not even like 5% of all parks. It might be bits of a range of parks. So the question still is worth asking, right? Can you deliver your obligations to provide green space, using 90 to 95% of the existing amount, as opposed to requiring 100% of the existing amount? And the question, if you want to try and raise $2 billion, we think it's worth asking.
Well, just on that notion of transference, because my impression is that with the overwhelming majority of council assets in the terms of buildings, they've had the choice of location to serve their communities, and that location is very important. And while there might be a hugely greater value that can be attracted to that land if it was something else was being done, the location is optimum for serving the surrounding community, and particularly in a period of hugely escalating land prices.
Yeah, look, and that might well be the case, but as we made the observation, right, you might form a different view about that if you thought that the land underneath something was worth $1 million, as opposed to if you found out the land underneath something was worth $10 million. You might think that actually sort of, maybe we could rent a space rather than own that land in the works.
Thank you. And the last time I looked, people didn't have picnics in the middle of golf courses. Councillor Crum.
They do in Scotland.
So you've done some work in Christchurch, right? Can you just give us a couple of comments on their work in identifying what is strategic and what isn't, at least in relation to just consistency for their position?
The work we did in Christchurch was solely focused on the commercial assets. So it was much much clearer, when they looked at each of the assets, sorry, I'm not being very clear. With the, let's say, community and infrastructure assets, it's a different sort of set of choices that you have to make. With the commercial assets, it needs to be sort of very clear about exactly what it is, what the objectives are that you have for the asset in particular. So, for example, with Christchurch International Airport, the council owns 75% of that, and look, the council hasn't made any decisions, but when we discussed it with them, we were debating what could be the objectives for owning that airport, and obviously it's about economic development, and it's about ensuring that the performance of that asset is optimised. I think the thing to note is that even under other ownership, the council considered that its objectives are going to be pretty much aligned with what the private sector owner would do with that asset. Obviously, there's there's the risk, I guess, that with some assets that the business plan that a private sector owner might want to implement might be at odds with what the objectives might be for the council, but that's that needs to be asset specific.
I could just add to that. On page 60 of our page 60 of our report, there's a flow chart here where we talk about the decision framework for working through to establish the strategic rationale for council ownership. And in Christchurch, there was a period of 5 or 6 workshops with councillors where we went through that very, very carefully, and concerns would be raised, work would be done, we'd come back, have another workshop, tick those things, move on, and at the end of it, there was a very widespread consensus about what was truly strategic and what wasn't.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Clow.
Yeah, it's pretty well the same question I asked EY about the commercial assets and that 7, which makes up 7%, but true valuation 9% of the assets. Is that clearly on the balance sheet is the only area where we actually get strong growth and gain generally, and probably fairly confident with the airport, for example, it's going to keep going up. Have you thought much about that? Because obviously you sell it, it's gone, bang. So we're then just going to be stuck with assets that are effectively community assets and infrastructure assets.
Yes, we have, actually. And there's probably a couple of observations to make. First of all, it's a truism that historical performance is no measure of expected future performance. And at any point in time, given the value today of an asset, basically what you can expect to get in the future for that asset is a standard commercial return. And there might be situations where it's appropriate for councils to own assets for the purposes of getting a standard commercial return. Our view is that in a situation where you are constrained from doing what you believe is value-enhancing infrastructure projects, that you need a stronger rationale for owning assets than that, and that you can also question, is the primary role of the council here to fund those things that wouldn't otherwise get funded, such as infrastructure and community assets, rather than to invest in commercial assets that would exist without council funding and ownership.
Okay, thank you. I have Councillor Lee.
Yes, I've been listening with interest, Madam Chair, but trying not to prolong the process. However, in terms of the Christchurch situation, which is somewhat academic and not personal to us, I'm interested to hear that the workshops in regard to, for instance, Christchurch Airport, one of the key assets of Christchurch City Holdings, this series of workshops, presumably to persuade councillors the merits of, to use your phrase, asset recycling, in that case, asset sales, partial or otherwise. Was there anyone in the room, was there any consultants with the brief to argue why it was good sense and a good long-term investment and strategic sense to hold revenue-earning assets. Was anyone giving that advice? Was there anything contestable, or just the
Councillor,
asset
that's
sale?
really nothing to do with this,
Sorry,
because that's to do with Christchurch. I think it's
Okay.
really not part of this debate.
You're probably right.
Councillor Hulse.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of things. I just think we need to be clear. I think there's a little bit of misunderstanding around the issue of park assets and no more green space to be purchased. I don't think we can let that one just sit there, because I think that will cause an awful lot of concern. As we look at upzoning and increasing urban density, we most certainly will be looking for opportunities for the purchase of new green space, and I think we need to make that really, really clear. The retention of our urban environment is absolutely critical to this city, you know, working for the next 30 years, so we just need to make that clear. The second thing is that that's probably a very good example of the opportunities that might exist to use that money to purchase those green spaces that are becoming increasingly expensive and unobtainable in these urban areas. And I don't think the ratepayers have got an appetite to spending cash on that sort of thing. So, you know, Madam Chair, just to be really clear, what you're proposing in your recommendations is an opportunity that we've got to then unpack all of these. The workshops are not to convince us to do anything. They're there to convince us of the fact that we need to take our role seriously and understand when to hold, when to fold, when to purchase, when to sell, and to do so from a fully informed basis rather than just from a what we've always done or what we think we might need to do because we've heard it from someone down the road. I think this is an exceedingly valuable and useful piece of work, and I don't think we should be threatened by it at all. When we come to the debate about what we actually do with this work, that's certainly when it will get serious, but at the moment I think it's an extraordinarily useful process.
Thank you. So I think that's a very good note to break for lunch on. Councillors, we have got some recommendations being added to the ones that we had, but I think if we break for lunch now, because it is 1:30 and you must all be starving, and I'm sure the people sitting in the back are, and then we can come back here at about, should we try and make it 10 to 2?
20 minutes.
Okay. Oh, well,
We
half an
never,
hour.
let's be realistic.
Okay, half an hour. All right, 2 o'clock back here. Thank you very much. And I believe maybe one of you will stay, so can I say thank you very much to everybody else. Thank you.